Hey there, if you're like me, you're new to Raid Shadow Legends. I just wanted to quickly relay some information that I would have found helpful when I first started playing. So you've chosen your starter. If you're like me, you've chosen Aethel. Kayle is also a really good option, as are all of them. They are all very good in their own right. Kayle especially is good for late game even, while the others tend to trail off. So you don't know who to pair with them though. That's the hard part. So let's look at some options. In the campaign, we can farm normal mode stages to get champion drops that are unique to each chapter. When farming these champions, I recommend stage 3 of any chapter, as the shields that they drop sell for the most amount of silver. Generally about 30% more than any other artifact. Also, when farming, it's best to use other champions that need experience, so that you can use them for food to level up your other champions, especially your starter as you're starting out, as you want to get them to 5 stars as quickly as possible, as your starter is going to be the champion that will carry you through the campaign in the early stages. Now let's take a look at what champions we can farm from each of these chapters, and which ones I recommend to look at. Teleria is a good choice. She has a few strong attacks. For example, she can place an increased attack buff on her allies, or she can place a shield on all of her allies. She has an aura as well, but it's probably not very useful. Let's look over here in chapters 2 and 3. They don't really have any good champions. Let's look at chapter 4. In chapter 4, we have Spirit Host. Spirit Host is very good, as she has a debuff removal. It looks like she can also heal herself rather. She has an increased attack buff on all of her allies. This increases to 50% increased attack with 3 Ascension. And here's her debuff removal. It has a long cooldown of 6 turns, but it can be reduced to 5 turns with 1 skill book. And also her aura increases the ally speed in all battles by 10%, which is generally a very good thing for the early stages. Now moving on, there's nothing good in chapter 5. Chapter 6 though, we have Eris. Eris has a random debuff removal that removes it from all of her allies. She has a 60% chance of placing an increased speed buff on all of her allies as well. And this also improves at 3 Ascension. She also will counterattack the attacker. And she also has an increased ally speed. Moving on, chapter 7 doesn't really have anything useful. Let's look at chapter 8. In chapter 8, Templar is decent. He is a tank that his damage actually scales based on his defense. So you see here it says damage inflicted is proportional to defense. And he has a couple abilities that do that. And he has an ability here that is unlocked at Ascension level 3. And this ability is pretty strong. Moving on. Chapter 9 is probably one of the best chapters, as we have quite a few here that are actually very decent. First of all, let's look at Berserker. Berserker is a good champion for the arena. He's very good for a cleanup crew, as this champion can fill his own turn meter if he has critical strikes. He also gets an extra turn if he kills a target, and he has an ability that attacks all enemies 2 times. So he is very strong in the arena, and he can deal a lot of damage, and it's a good choice for the arena. Moving on to War Maiden. War Maiden is a very, very solid choice all around. War Maiden has the ability to place poison on her target. She can also place an increased attack buff on herself if she crits on this attack. And she can place a decreased defense debuff on all of her enemies. Shield Guard is actually an interesting one, because he can actually solo the entire game. Entire campaign at least. Now you need really good gear, really high crit rate to do that. and you probably won't be able to do it for a long time. However, he is very strong. As you see, his battle stance fills his turn meter by 20% on each critical hit. And the damage of this champion is also proportional to his defense. So he is another tank, and all of his damage is based on his defense. And he can also remove a debuff from himself on each turn, which is another interesting ability to have. Moving on, I believe there is... Where is Saurus? Here he is. Saurus is another really strong champion, as this champion can solo the entire campaign as well. He's probably easier to build for this job. As you can see, his basic attack hits everyone, and it just scales in damage with more skill books. And as you can see, his second ability here attacks all enemies twice, and he has a 10% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction debuff for 1 turn. This is really strong, and with him geared with the appropriate gear, he can clear the entire campaign. Generally, lifesteal is required for this, as he needs to be able to heal himself. And in Chapter 12, we have one more champion, and that is Diabolist. Diabolist is actually a very strong champion, a very strong support champion rather, and she can basically act as a speed leech, and she can place an increased speed buff on all of her allies for 2 turns. This can be decreased to a 3-turn cooldown, as well as filling the turn meter of all of her allies on a 4-turn cooldown max skill. And also when you ascend it, it decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. So effectively that's a 30% increase to your turn meter on all of your allies at once. I'm sure I've missed some champions in here that might be useful to you, but this is just a starting point. From here you can go and explore and figure out what works for you. Please like this video if it was helpful, or dislike if it wasn't. Thank you for watching. Take care.